Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to the course of Consultancy Project Experiential Learning, which is Management 529. And I would be your instructor for this course. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Khurram Shahzad Mughal, and basically my background is that I've done BSc in Mathematics, Statistics and Economics from Punjab University. And then I did my MBA from NAST. With specialization in finance and investment specifically, and then I went for my PhD abroad to Austria, PhD in economics, and I came back around in 2010 and then have been teaching at like various institutions. Specifically, I've been working previously at Iqra University, and then currently I'm working at ComStats as an assistant professor. I have been teaching various courses in the field of economics, somehow related to this area also, because it's part of a behavioral economics field that we do study in a broader subject of economics. Now, this course is very interesting because more you learn about this course, more interested you would get into it. Let me come to my teaching methodology that I would be adopting first. When we have interactive courses, like when I'm actually in a classroom, the difference is that I ask students again and again that if they have acquired the concept, and based on their response, either I repeat the thing or I try to explain it further with a different example. In that way, I try to make it sure that the knowledge or the concept is imparted in the student. But when we come to this sort of recording environment in which you guys are on the other side of screen and I cannot ask you any questions, what would happen is that I would try to be very slow in explaining the concepts. Then I would keep on repeating things and I would try to strengthen each and everything with examples. This is what we have learned, that how to teach through video lectures to students, because repetition is the main thing, and giving everyday examples is the other thing. These are the two main pillars of how we try to impart knowledge into our students, through recorded lectures, in which unfortunately they cannot ask questions yet. We are not at that level of technology right now. Maybe someday we would, but let's hope for the best. So what we would do is, what this course is about. This course is about it is very convenient. This is how I take up the courses, that we divide courses into various pillars, various foundations of the course. So the first foundation is learning. What is learning as such? And the second part of this course is experiential learning. Experiential learning is a type of learning that we would discuss later on. And then it is about the consultancy projects, the projects that we take up with organizations. So in short, this course is about, or it is a branch of work-based learning mechanism, where you go to the field, you work and you get your experience and you learn from that experience, and then you apply that experience and your knowledge in the field again. And this process goes on until that part of that knowledge or that information becomes a part of your system. And we would discuss all of this, and that is why, because what we would teach you in this course is that what is learning, what do you perceive of learning, and what are basically various theoretical foundations of learning. And then we would come to the concept. We want to impart knowledge into you, that how you, based on various theories. Theories are basically about behaviors of individuals, and various individuals have different ability of learning, and this different ability of learning, and you need to place yourself at some location, and you need to learn from the environment. So if you learn from the environment, then that becomes a part of yourself as such, and that part of yourself, from the environment you get experience, and then how you apply that experience, and then you get further learning chances out of that experience. So this is what we are going to tell you. We are going to explain, in fact, through this course I'm going to explain various theoretical foundations of learning, and how does experiential learning matter. and how important it is, and what are the theoretical foundations of various experiential learning mechanisms. And if you explore it even on the internet, like various theories, from very historical perspective, from Aristotle even, learning has been a very important aspect, that how do people acquire knowledge, and what type of knowledge they acquire, and why different people acquire different types of knowledge, and or why do two same individuals learn differently from a similar experience. So it all depends on circumstances that we are going to discuss in this course. So the first half of the course would be discussion about learning and various theoretical foundations of learning. Then we would move to the second foundation, which is experiential learning, that what are the theoretical foundations of experiential learning. And the third one is like discussion on various means and mechanisms through which learning is acquired. So that is why, in fact, because how would you gain that experience is when you go into the field actually. When you would do an internship or a job or something like that, you would actually learn from the experience. But in this course, we would explain all those theoretical foundations so that you can understand that why and how you extracted such a type of an experience out of whatever environment you are placed into, and what type of information that you should perceive, and what is reasons for actions of the others, and how those actions affect you. So this is the focus of this course, and that is why it is basically based on 5 lectures, in which we would explain all the theories, all the concepts, and we would relate it to, whenever possible, we would relate it to the practical environment also. So in the first lecture, and maybe in the second or first half of the second lecture, we'll see how fast we can go and how much we can cover in the first lecture. So what we would do is that we would be discussing various aspects of learning, and then we would move on to experiential learning, as I said. Now I would start this course with a very unorthodox example, a very interesting one, yet very unorthodox example, and a very simplistic sort of an example. You know, the concept of swimming, people go and dive into the water and swim. It seems very simple. And then there is a process of when you start swimming, you learn to swim, right? It is not like imparted by default into an individual, because when a young baby is born, they breathe themselves. So that means that process is inherent into that individual, that baby. But when we get into the water, we do not automatically swim. So that means that we have learned to swim, So if we have to learn to swim, then how do different people achieve that task? Now, again, coming to the example of any unorthodox example. When I was young, my father, being from a military background, what he did was he taught me a few stuff outside the water. Of course, he told me that, okay, when you are in the water, you have to hold your breath, number 1. Then number 2, you have to stay out of the water. That is the main aim of swimming. And the third one is that you need to flap your hands like this and flap your feet like this. And this is what he told me. And then he threw me in the water. That was the interesting part. And he would wait outside, he would throw me in the water again, and as soon as it would seem that I'm in trouble, he would dive in and ask a lifeguard to pull me out. And there were number of repetitions of this, and in the end I learned how to swim, So how would you place this? Would you place this as an experiential learning? A thing that I learned out of experience? It's not that simple, There is a theoretical part of that learning, that what are the various aspects that I need to do to stay out of water. And then there is a practical part of that. So if even single one of them is missing, then that is not applicable. If for example, there are 3 individuals. There is a single individual who you give him the complete theoretical foundations of swimming. I had a friend of mine, and we went for swimming, and he explored all the books, all the material on the internet. He even watched YouTube videos, and then he learned out of that this is how we swim. And you place him at call him the individual A. Then there is the second individual who has the basic theoretical knowledge, hold your breath and stuff like that, and he is going to experience it also. He is experiencing it also. And the third individual who does not have any theoretical knowledge, you do not tell him anything, you just throw him in the water. Who would survive, in fact? So the individual who had only theoretical knowledge, if you throw him in the water, he would drown. An individual who does not have any theoretical knowledge, the individual C, would also drown, because he does not have any theoretical knowledge. If you put him into experience, then it won't work. And then comes the individual B, the individual who has been given the theoretical knowledge, who has been given the experience of swimming, and then only he would swim. So this is basically experiential learning. You know from where to learn, you know how to do it, and then you actually apply that thing. You actually do that thing. So that the knowledge you get out of from actual doing that thing is experiential learning. You have the theoretical foundation. So when we teach you in the classrooms, when professors meet their students in the classroom, they give them the complete theoretical knowledge of, for example, the subject of human resource, the subject of management, the subject of finance. So is it enough that, would that be enough for them to run an organization? No. When they go to internships, they actually experience that environment. They actually work in that environment. They actually see that what book told them and what actually is there, what policies of human resource, for example, what policies of, for example, reward and motivation system are documented in the book, what theories are there, and what actually organizations do. So there is a difference between the book and the practicality, and he has to get an experiential stimulus or an experiential, and we have to work in an actual environment to get the experience out of it, and to actually do the experiential learning. So it would be same as like driving a car. If you tell an individual everything theoretically, that this is how you drive a car, and he never drives the car, then he won't be able to drive the car when necessary. There is a second individual to whom you just ask him to sit in the car and drive the car. Without any base knowledge, he would not be able to even start the car. He would not know where the ignition is, how to start it, how to put it in the first gear, or maybe it's an automatic, how to press the accelerator to make it drive. So these are like two different individuals who cannot do that. But then there is another individual who is given all the theoretical knowledge, and then he is asked to sit in the car and try to drive the car. And once he drives the car, he would know that how to drive it. He would learn from the experience also. And out of these three individuals, you can easily see who would be a better driver. I didn't hear an answer, but still I assume that you understand my point of view over here, what I'm trying to express over here. I'm trying to highlight the importance of this subject. I am trying to highlight the importance of the theoretical foundations of an individual's learning system, because different individuals have different abilities to learn, different individuals have different mechanisms to learn. When we face a classroom of 30 or 40 individuals, not every individual can be taught in a similar manner. All of them have different learning capabilities, all of them have different learning mechanisms. Some people would be learning just by watching slides, and some people would need examples to gain that knowledge, and some people would need real life examples, or they would like to know my experiences to understand the actual concept. So different individuals have different capabilities of learning, so different you can say styles of learning. So it is important that you place yourself at a place, and then you see that how can you learn from an environment. So moving on with this lecture, the first lecture would be basically based upon the theoretical foundations of learning, and for that we need to understand what is learning itself. There are numerous definitions of learning. If you would be amazed by it, because we just walk into a classroom and we expect that people would be, there would be professors standing out in the classrooms and delivering lectures, and we would learn out of it. And you would never have thought, in my guess, most people have never think about that learning is itself a field of research and a field of study. There have been various discussions and debates of how to teach and how people would learn, and what are different types of learning cycles, what are different learning channels, rather, not cycles, and how do people keep stuff in their memory. There are so that is how there has been, since there has been so much research on learning itself, there have been many theoretical foundations and theories about learning itself. So we would go through that to understand, to give you a brief picture of what is learning, and then we would slowly move on to experiential learning, and then we would move on to practical application of all of that. So learning is defined in so many ways. Like you can see a list of definitions which actually define learning. It is the change in behavior as a result of experience or practice. You see, now what is learning? That when you go to an environment, you learn from that environment, and then you have certain experience in your memory, and next time that event take place, you actually associate that event to something that you have already learned from experience. You see, so and then there is practice. What would be practice? For example, any squash player would not be able to hit the ball in the right place the first time they play, or any cricket player would not be able to hit a sixer each and every time. He would need to practice for that, you know. So that practice, in other words, practice makes man perfect. So that is a true thing. So the changes in behavior out of experience and out of practice are actually the process of learning. That is one way how learning is defined. And in a much simpler definition, you can also see on the slide that it is a simple acquisition of knowledge. And then we will move on to debate about this again, that what is knowledge, what is the definition of knowledge itself. But let's ignore that, because philosophy, in the subject of philosophy, knowledge is actually discussed a lot again further. It's epistemology, the theory of knowledge. We will discuss that slightly. So then there is knowledge gained through study, another definition of learning. You see, now the first definition was that knowledge gained through experience and practice. And the second definition is knowledge gained through study. So aren't these all the types of knowledge? On one thing you experience something, and the other thing is that you go and actually practice to learn something, and then you study to learn something. I have given you example of all of these in my first, like the very unorthodox example of swimming, or for example the example of driving. So all of these show these 3 points: from experience, from practice, and from study. So all of these are definitions of learning. Then to gain knowledge of or a skill in something through study, teaching, instruction, or experience, another definition of learning, a bit broader definition of learning, which states that when you gain something through teaching, again when somebody is telling you that okay, this concept is about, through instruction, somebody instructs you this is how to do it. And then the third thing is experience, again, which is very important, that you learn from your experiences. There has been a very interesting example of experiences. You know, the process of learning is not only restricted to human beings. Animals also learn from whatever happens. There have been experiments on rats and monkeys and all that, and they also show learning patterns. Whenever you have a pet in your house, for example a dog or a cat, you teach them like not to throw litter around, not to for example climb on the sofas and stuff like that, and they learn, and you can teach them actually. So that is what learning is about. So learning is simply the process of gaining knowledge, right? Another broader definition: knowledge can be acquired through practice, knowledge can be acquired through experience, knowledge can be acquired through for example study, knowledge can be acquired through teaching. So all of that is learning. The process by which behavior is changed, shaped or controlled is another definition of learning. That when an individual learns, then his behavior is shaped in a sense that in one systematic direction, and controlled, another definition of learning. For example, when you when we go into a class, then there is another theoretical debate on this, that on one theoretical foundation treats students as an empty vessel. They go to a classroom, they do not know a thing, and you just impart knowledge and fill them up. That's learning. That's the process of learning or teaching. Then there is another concept that students already have certain experience based on their life, and when you give them a concept, each of them would perceive that concept based on their experiences that they have had. That is another very interesting scenario. So as I said, that this topic is very interesting, number one, and number two, learning is a field which has been researched upon itself for a very long time, just to acquire more learning. A very interesting cycle, you know. The individual process of constructing understanding based on experience from a wide range of sources. Another broad definition, or a definition which states that learning is a process that you have experiences from your friends or your life, your social life, you have experiences from your employment life, the work life, you have experiences from, for example, in your house, your family life. There are so many, each individual is made up of so many social circles or circles, work life, and you know, segments of his life. Each individual is made up of so many of these, and based on upon so many relationships. So since these things matter, and you extract knowledge and experience out of these, and then that is how you gain knowledge. So based on these vast definitions of learning, I can simply say that learning is a process in which an individual's behavior, this is how I would define it, individual's behavior would change based upon his experiences, based upon his studies, based upon his you can say practice, and through this process certain skills are developed in an individual, either through practice or through experience. So this would be a very broad definition, trying to summarize all of these smaller definitions that have been are showing up in the slides behind. Now, another further definitions: a persisting change in human performance or performance potential brought about as a result of learners' interaction with the environment. A very interesting definition by Driscoll in 1994. The point is that it is a persisting change in human performance. When performance is improving persistently, or continuously, then that means that an individual is learning, right? And then another important aspect is that it is also about the performance potential. One is realized performance and the other one is about performance potential, and any knowledge acquired by the individual based upon his experiences from the environment, or based upon his interaction with the environment, and that results into the learning process. Then another definition is the learning is the relatively permanent change in a person's knowledge or behavior due to his experiences. Now again, the experiences from the environment in which he is living, it can be social environment, work environment, family life, it can be with friends or relatives, or it can be with your office colleagues. In short, you are in an environment. Again, you and I both are in an environment, and both of us are learning some things over here. You know, like I am facing you guys through a camera right now, and this experience today that I have of teaching through this medium I would be learning out of this environment. And you sitting in front of your laptops or your computers or TV connected with the DVD players or CD players, whatever the environment is, and sitting at your homes or your offices, and you would be again learning out of that environment through this medium, you know. So it is a relatively permanent change in an individual. his behavior and his knowledge due to the experience that he's having. Again, another definition, a very interesting aspect. Then an enduring change in behavior or in capacity to behave in a given fashion which results from practice or from other forms of experience. Now another very interesting definition, you see, it is a change in behavior or an individual's capacity to behave in a given way. You see, it is again something like human performance or the potential performance. It is like behaving and capacity to behave. Like when you acquire knowledge from the environment, when you go to your workplace, let's discuss this from experiential perspective. When you go to your office for the first time, or maybe you have been working over there for some time, but the first time you go late in your office, then it depends on how your boss reacts to that. First time you go late to your office, he might ignore that, right? Then the first time you go late to the office, he might maybe shunt you politely, or maybe he would just politely mention that you are late today. And then in the third case, he might confront you directly that okay, coming late is wrong and you should not, and maybe start shouting at you. Maybe he's already pissed at something due to some other reason. And in the third case, in the fourth case, maybe you would get an official punishment. You might get a cut in the salary for those hours that you are late. You might get a warning letter or something. So all these are different experiences, and you would learn differently from these experiences, and different individuals would learn differently from these experiences. It is very interesting to see that, you know, there would be an individual whose boss ignores him in that case, and out of his experiences he would know that maybe his boss is ignoring him, ignoring that aspect of him coming late because he's just ignoring it for the first time, and the second time he comes late, then it would create an uncomfortable environment, and that guy would be careful and his behavior would change permanently. And then there is a second individual. The second individual comes late, his boss ignores him, and he would take it as a relaxation. He would say that okay, this guy doesn't care about me coming late, and so I can consistently come late, and next time he would be late again. You see, different people have learned differently from the same environment because they had different experiences in the past. So the learning environment is created based on your experiences, who you are, because your experiences makes an individual. The way you have lived your life actually is defined by different types of experiences that you have had. So all those experiences might be intentional experiences, you interact with the environment, or maybe brought upon by you without your consciousness and brought upon you by the environment itself. So whatever that is, that has created an experience and certain knowledge base, and that knowledge base would make you react to some environment, and that reaction of some environment would create another knowledge base, would either change your performance or performance potential, or change your behavior or your capacity to behave. So a very interesting aspect. And another individual would have to wait for the punishment to come to actually correct his behavior in that case. So you see, different individuals would behave differently might behave differently in a same environment. So it is very interesting to see how environment molds your behavior, or how your experiences mold your behavior, and this experience is again a part of yourself, and that molds your future behavior. A very interesting cycle that goes on in the learning process. So we discussed in these three very interesting definitions that learning is basically a persistent change in human performance or the potential performance that has been brought upon on him because of his interaction with the environment. Now, the second definition is that it is a relatively permanent change in a person's knowledge or behavior due to his experience. The third definition is another interesting definition, that it is a change in human behavior or his capacity to behave based upon his experiences and practice, or experience with the environment and practice. So all those three definitions, all these three definitions are actually more concrete in terms of learning, and they actually summarize all of those aspects that we discussed in the previous slides. That it is like from practice, it is from experience, it is from study, it is from teaching, and all that. All those aspects that we discussed in the previous slides are part of these three definitions that we have just discussed. Now, some very important aspects before we move on. Learning is something that all humans do. They start from the stage of fetuses when they are within their mother's womb, and the learning process starts over there. Because when the baby is born, they know how to breathe. They automatically know how to breathe, and that is actually and there are studies that actually when babies are born, all the experiences of the mother that she is having before the birth are transmitted into the individual directly. So that is again another separate debate, but the point is that those fetuses inside the womb actually learn from the environment that they have. They know how to feed, they know when to feed, they know how to breathe when they are born and all that. And then infants start learning. When young babies are born, they start the learning process. The learning process starts the moment that they are born actually. First they learn how to feed from their mother, then they maybe learn how to eat when they grow up a little bit. They become a baby, for example. From infant to the conversion to baby, through that process they have learned so much from their environment. Babies know that to shut their eyes when there is bright light on their faces. Babies do that. So that is learning from the environment. They start crying when they are hungry. So another a type of a signal that they send to their parents. They start crying when they wake up at night. Why do they do that? Because that is to give an alarm to the parents that okay, I am up and I need to feed. That is an interesting thing. So they start learning, and then infants also start learning, and then children start the learning process. They learn from each and every experience. My kid one day touched a heater, a gas heater. Now not that much, thanks to God, but he touched that heater and he felt it was hot. And that kid of mine never went close to that heater ever again. The point is that he learned from his experience. The other kid, when I told him that this heater is hot, won't go, he won't listen. He won't listen to that. He is always curious, what does hot mean, and why does he stop me from going over there? Now one has learned from the experience, the other one is actually trying to have that experience. So they always say that you should always listen to elderly because they have experiences that you do not have. So the point is that kids learn from their environment. Kids grow up to see their elders, and we would discuss that in theoretical foundations also, that they make role models who they follow. So children see their parents, and then they follow them, and their parents are their first teachers. And then they go to school, they make new role models over there, and then they start learning from the broader environment. They start watching television, and they learn from the celebrities, and they learn about how to act, how to behave from the media. And that is why there has been debate in many countries about violence being shown on the media, because kids learn from that environment also. Then comes on that since kids learn from the environment, they learn from each other, they learn from their teachers, they learn from their parents, and they learn from the experiences that they have on each step. And for example, abusive parents who really certain times hit their children, those type of parents have children who are scared of, who you can say there are discussions in psychology that if you are abusive to your children, they have low self-esteem and low confidence. So then, because that is the environment that they got, it is like because they were brought up in that environment. Then moving on, since children learn from their environment, then adults also learn from their environment. We consistently learn from our life's experiences. That is why that our elders sometimes tell us not to do this and not to do that, because they have had certain experiences. or related experiences, and based on those experiences, may they be related or not, or the same experience or not, but they have certain wisdom. And that wisdom is what they do is they try to pass on that wisdom to their young ones, or to other adults, or their children, or their nephews, or their grandchildren. So learning is what all the humans do. They start from the age of the fetus till the point that they die. Learning process continues, it never ends. Then learning is not unique to human. All living things learn from their environment. Now, as I discussed earlier, that if you keep a pet as a dog as a pet in your house, then he would also learn. That dog would also learn from the environment. That dog would learn that whenever you call him, for example, it is feeding time, it is bath time, it is going out time, and all that, they would learn from the environment. Even cats do, even monkeys learn from the environment. There is a very interesting example, you can see that on the internet, about a group of monkeys that were experimented upon. I do not know the exact details of the example right now, but it is something like scientists put certain number of monkeys in a cage and they placed a ladder in the center. And it is about basically culture and how things transmit from one generation to other, but still there is an aspect of learning, and they would hang a banana on the top of, or a bunch of bananas on top of that ladder. And whenever a monkey tries to climb on that ladder to get that banana, they would shower hot water on all of them. So then they started learning, and they learned that whenever somebody tries to climb that ladder, hot water is showered on us. So this is how they learned from the environment. So whenever another monkey would try to climb that ladder, rest of the monkeys would beat that monkey up, because they know that the punishment is coming as soon as he would try to climb that ladder. So this is how animals learn also. They learn from their experiences, they learn from the environment. So learning evolved as an adoption for promoting survival. The basic instinct is survival, even today our learning process is based on survival. We need to survive in the environment, and in order to survive in the environment, we learn from the environment. So it is a basic instinct that has been gifted upon us by God to learn from the environment so that we can survive. So it is the basic survival instinct that has caused basically, I don't know how much to believe on that, but the process of evolution is based on survival. And that process of evolution, how animals came out of water, or how, for example, giraffe's neck is so long that it can reach higher branches of the trees, and certain animals have shortened necks, certain animals have wings, and all that debate of evolution is based on survival and learning from the environment and adopting according to the environment. Now, so basically what is learning? After all these definitions, I can summarize them into these two very simple points. Learning is a process, and learning is a product as well, a very interesting thing. Learning is a process, is the process through which you learn. You learn various things from the environment based on certain process, and so learning is a process in itself. And then learning is also a product, because when you learn something, you have some capability. As we discussed in the definitions, it is skill, behavior, potential to perform, potential behavior, performance, improvement in performance. All these are products of learning. So learning is a process as well as learning is a product. Now, how it is a process? Learning involves the individual's brain as well as body. You learn from your for example, physical experiences. There are for example, there are like the five senses: the smell, the sight, the voice, and for example the hearing and the touch, and all those, and all those you see capabilities, or all those five senses are related to the external environment, and that information from the external environment is stored inside the brain. So both of these are required for an individual to learn. It is very sad, but I would give you a very sort of a sad example. Do you know that people who cannot listen when they are born by birth, you can say deaf by birth, who cannot listen, their ears are not properly functioning, so they cannot listen from the environment. They cannot speak also. I mean, they have voice, they have tongues, they have perfectly developed speaking mechanism, but they cannot speak words. Can you see the difference? Because they need to listen to words to speak words, So whenever a kid learns from the environment, if a young baby learns to say, for example, bread or rice, or the first words that they learn are, for example, mama, and calling their mother and calling their father. So they learn those words when they listen to those words. So the learning process requires, for example, both of these senses. They learn to speak those words because in the start they learn to listen to those words. So that is how the learning process is involved. So in the end, I would say that learning involves the individual's brain and body. Both of these are required to complete the learning process, or an ideal learning process. Then learning involves other things. Those are dyads, groups, organizations, communities, societies, because you learn from all those environments. Dyads are basically two individuals, for example, husband and wife, and two brothers, or brother and a sister, and group of two are dyads. Now you learn from that pair, for example. When you are part of a pair, you learn from that, the other individual, with you based on your experiences. Then you learn from your groups, you learn from your group of friends, you learn from your group of colleagues, you learn from, for example, your group of relatives. And all these groups teach you some stuff, teach you some things. And these things are basically the process of learning. These things you learn from that environment also. Then there are organizations where you work. These organizations also teach you things. And secondly, based on a broader debate of organizations also teach stuff to the external environment, how the organizations operate. You must have heard corporate social responsibility, the advertisements, and how you behave socially. That is a separate debate, but still organizations also teach to their environment. They also give information to their environment through advertisements, through media, through the behavior of their employees. So that is again another learning environment for the employees who are inside that organization, and for the people who are around that organization, their suppliers, the government, and all that. And the government itself is part of sort of an organism, so it also teaches you. Then there are communities. The communities in which the locality you live, community of people, they are also means of learning for you. Then there is the whole society at large, the bigger society, that also is a source of learning. Then learning takes place somewhere in the environment, any type of environment, any type of physical environment. That is where learning takes place. And it needs to be with things and tools. For example, this is an environment, a learning environment. It has, for example, a button for me to change the slides. It has a camera for me to speak to. It has a mic for me to record into. And then they have those systems through which they process them. And then they have those CDs on which they write those lectures. And then those lectures are delivered to you. Then you also need to put those lectures in maybe, for example, you have a laptop, you put them in the CD-ROM, you play the CD-ROM, you need a Windows media player to play that, or any other type of a software which you use, and then you play that back and you listen to it. And of course you need speakers, and you need good functioning ears, and you need peace of mind, in other words. But let that be separate. Let's talk about the physical environment only. But that physical environment is with things and tools. And that physical environment is necessary for the learning process. Just like the brain and the body and the groups and for example in organizations, that learning environment is also necessary. When I walk into my office, I have a desk and I have a system. When I walk to a classroom, I have students in front of me, desks, chairs, projector, slides. I have all those tools, and all those things are necessary for the physical environment, the physical learning environment. It can be, for example, when I need to have a car, I need to drive, I need signals, I need somebody controlling the traffic, and all those are tools of the environment which are required for learning process. So learning is the process in which you go through time and you learn stuff from the environment. So in other words, learning is a process. I hope I have made myself clear that learning is a process. It starts from the individual, that he has a functioning brain and body, and that functioning brain and body is a part of a society or a culture or an organization or a community and all that. And that organization and culture and community is in a physical environment, or that individual along with his brain and body and all that groups and society and organization are in a physical environment. So that physical environment has certain tools and stuff and things, and that is how learning process takes place. So it is a process, a very interesting thing to see learning about. But then learning is a product also. How it is a product? Learning is about ideas and concepts. Learning is about behaviors and skills. Learning is about attitudes and values. You see, from the environment, how we perceive the environment, how others behave in that environment, how we perceive their behavior, how we perceive their attitude, what type of values are in that society, in that organization, all that constitutes the product of learning. Because in the end, I have a certain skill, I have a certain idea, I have a certain concept, my behavior has changed, my performance has changed, my potential to perform has changed, my ability to behave has changed. So all those changes are the products of learning. And so learning is a product also. When I go to an environment, whatever ideas I have, whatever concepts I have been imparted inside me through that learning process, have been incorporated inside me first from my parents, then from my siblings, then from the school and colleges and universities, and from the country and the complete environment, from my friends also. And from my students also, most of all from my students, you know, because when we interact with them, the way they behave is how I would polish my skills and how I would behave in the future. And it is how I would grasp ideas out of that environment, how my concepts are built about the society of Pakistan or the students in Pakistan. Or for example, I went to Austria for my PhD. Now that was a different experience. That was a different environment. And I learned from that environment. And when I learned from that environment, then it automatically created another product. Now, do you see, that is, I create ideas from the environment that I have. I build my concepts from the environment that I have. Then, based on those ideas and concepts, I behave in a certain manner. And certain skills are polished, and my behavior is reformulated. Maybe it is reformulated. So now I have a behavior and an ability to behave in a certain environment based on the ideas and concepts that I have extracted from the environment. And then I might need to polish certain skills. For example, a teacher, when he walks into the classroom for the first time, if he is not by default a public speaker, he would have difficulty in that. But then he would have to polish those skills to be a good teacher, to express himself clearly, to express himself in a consistent and precise manner so that the student understands clearly. So that behavior and those skills are from the ideas and concepts that he have grasped from the environment, and then he comes to the environment and then he behaves, and then he polishes certain skills with practice. And that results into a teacher in front of you. And then there are attitudes and values, how others see you and how you see others, because values and attitudes are incorporated in an individual through their history, and that attitude and those values are imparted in the society. So those attitudes and values also affect the learning process. When you walk into an organization, for example, you walk into a multinational, then they would have different set of values. When you walk into a public sector organization in Pakistan, they would have different set of values. Their attitude would be different. When you walk into a public sector organization in a developed country, for example, their attitudes would be different. When you walked into a private sector organization in a you can say in a developed country, their attitudes and values would be different. When you walk into a public sector school, the attitudes and values over there would be different. When you walk into a private sector school, a high-class private sector school, the attitudes and values and their teaching mechanism, everything would be different. So these differences are the products of the learning process, and they actually create experiences. Then it's a process again. And out of those experiences, when I develop certain ideas and concepts, and I establish certain behavioral parameters, and for example, there is potential to perform and there is potential to behave in a certain environment, then that is the product of learning. I hope you see the difference between the process of learning and the product of learning. Then, in order to understand, I have talked a lot about learning right now, and I have tried to express what I think of learning myself, and I have tried to express it with the examples. I have repeated so many times. There are certain theories which exist about the learning behavior of the individuals, how they learn and why they learn that. And as I said, that first we would start with the theories of learning, then we would move on to experiential learning and theories on that, and then we would try to jot it down on practical grounds. Now, so the question is then, what is a theory, right? A theory provides a general explanation of observations made over time. A theory explains and predicts behaviors. So when I say that it's about, I am going to talk about theories of learning, then the point is that theory actually tries to predict how an individual would behave, how an individual would learn in our context. And then the point is that theory can never be established beyond any doubt. It is not always 100% true. There have been many cases, we will discuss that over here, that a certain theoretical foundation has been accepted over a long period of time. And then for many years, after many years, they realize that that is not the true theoretical foundation. Actual theoretical foundation is this one, and a new theory pops up. And it covers that theory as a whole. It is a replacement of that theory. So previously individuals thought that that was the real theory, and now this time this is the real theory. So maybe this would be modified or proved wrong later on. So a theory can never be established beyond all doubts, and a theory can be modified over time. Theories seldom have to be thrown out completely if thoroughly tested, but sometimes a theory may be widely accepted for a long time and later disproved. So if a theory is tested, because when a theory is tested and proved 101%, it becomes a law. And if that is a theory, as long as it is a theory, it is being tested, it is being modified. It might be disproved later on, but as long as it exists, this is generally accepted theory. And we are going to, through this course, we are going to discuss various theories on the process of learning. So the question is that how do people learn? The easy answer is that we do not know for sure, honestly speaking. But the difficult answer is that we have multiple theories based on the learning process of the individuals, that how individuals learn from the environment, and what they learn from the environment, and how they process it. And because it is a complex process, as I said, there are so many parameters involved. There is brain and body. No two individuals are alike. Then that brain and body is placed in a different environment. There are different dyads, there are different groups, there are different organizations, and then there are different physical environments with different types of tools and things. So the point is that you cannot generalize all the theory to complete all the individuals. One size does not fit all. That is the main thing. So the point is that we have multiple theories which provide us like some aspect of the learning process from different perspectives. And these theories stem from, for example, psychology, the field of psychology, the field of sociology, the field of philosophy, anthropology, evolutionary biologists, linguistics, and neuroscientists. So all these types of individuals actually work on these theories, that how do people learn. As I said in the start, that this is a topic which is most widely researched, and this is the reason that it is being researched in so many fields. So we do not have a concrete answer that how do people learn, but we have various theoretical foundations. And I would express in this course all those various theoretical foundations. And then when you go to the actual work environment, you would see the applicability of those theoretical foundations. And what most useful way would be is that when we discuss this course continuously, you relate it to your experiences also. I would also give examples. I would also give examples related to those theories that I'm going to discuss. And you would see them working in the real life environment, but in order to grasp it strongly, relate them to your experiences also. Then the broad domain of theories, there is John Dewey who once said, it is a very good statement, just to answer the first question. The first question was that, do we know how people learn? I said no, because there are so many theories on that. We do not know concretely exactly what. But he has such a good argument. I believe that educational process has two sides, one psychological and one sociological. Profound differences in theory are never gratuitous or invented. They grow out of conflicting elements in a genuine problem. I hope you understand this, that there are psychological and there are sociological learning processes, right? Then the differences in those theories is not invented themselves. They do not mean to contradict themselves. The differences on those theories are not invented intentionally. They grow out of conflicting elements in a genuine problem, because in one single problem there might be conflicting elements, and from the aspect of one element one theory arises, and the aspect of other element the other theory arises. That's why there are conflicting theories. All of those theories might be pointing to the right direction. It is for you to choose, and it is for the research that proves later on that which theory is more applicable. Then before we move on, how did we get to this point? That is the main question. As I said, that from the historical perspective, philosophers and psychologists have been talking about learning process. So let us see a brief history. In order to understand anything, as I said, that one single individual, how he behaves in a given environment is what he has experienced, is based upon what he has experienced all his life. So if an individual has experienced different stuff, then the second individual, even for example, two, you can say identical twins would behave differently. Two identical twins who are brought up in different environment. Identical twins would mean that they have similar capacities, they look the same, they might behave the same if they are given a same environment. But if they are brought up in different environments in a given circumstance, they would behave differently, because those environments have brought up their experiences and their learning process. So we need to see the history of what various, you can say, philosophers had to say about the knowledge and the learning itself. For example, Plato, the famous philosopher, he said that truth is found within ourselves. Each individual would behave rationally. Rationalist approach. This is the rationalist approach, that each individual would look for the truth in himself, truth about knowledge basically. Ideas do not belong to the actual world. They are too perfect. One's conception about triangles and circles, they belong to the real world in which ideas are eternal and flawless. Basically, Plato had the idea of knowledge in a perspective that there is the real world and there is the actual world. And in the real world, we create ideas about things. And the actual world, it is different. For example, the basic argument behind this is that there are perfect shapes. For example, triangles and circles and squares and hexagons and octagons. But in nature, how it has created the environment, you never actually see those shapes. They are not the perfect shapes that we imagine. So the actual world and the real world. Real world is the one in which ideas are created. They are eternal and flawless. They are perfect ideas. But actual world is different from the real world. And knowledge is innate in a place at birth. That knowledge is inside an individual, within ourselves, the first statement, within ourselves. So knowledge is drawn out when teachers ask questions, help students recall their experiences, insights that they possess, self-reflection. These are very deep things. They were philosophers actually. So the point is that learning is a passive process in which a student knows things, but then the instructor, with questioning and with discussion, brings out that thing outside of that individual. That was the view of Plato about the knowledge and about the learning. This was Plato's allegory of the cave. It is very interesting that the thing that you see on the slides right now, it was basically he wanted to show the position of scholars in a society, but then it has another perspective in which you can see on one side there are prisoners, and it is assumed that prisoners are chained to one single place and they can only see the wall. And on that wall there are certain shadows being cast. And he says that their world is only what they see out of there, what they see in the shadows on that wall. So what they see in the shadows on that wall represents their world and how they perceive the world. So different people would have different experiences. What they see is what they perceive, and actually in reality the things would be different. You can see the actual world in which the fire, when you would see the slide closely, the fire is reflecting different things which form a shadow of a chair on the left side. So they perceive a chair, actually it is not a chair. So there is a difference between how we perceive things and how the things are actually there. So knowledge is a very different thing, and it is based on our experiences, and it is how we perceive different things. That is why I said, because this answers the main question, that different individuals have different experiences and how two individuals would behave differently in a given environment. Then there is Aristotle. Aristotle is the one who was the empiricist. He said that truth is found outside ourselves. It is not inside an individual which would be dug out by the instructor. It is outside. We learn from our senses. We learn from empirics. Empirics would be that when you feel angry, that is inside. But when you punch somebody with that anger, that would be empirical. So that is the learning process. That is the knowledge being created. So he was an empiricist. He said that learning is outside an individual, not inside an individual. Then actually he developed the scientific method of gathering data to study the world around him. It was not based on perception. It was not based on what an individual thinks, and he did not assume that knowledge is all inside an individual and being brought out by the teacher, as we mentioned in the last slide for Plato. But he said that knowledge is actually empirical, and it is outside in the environment that we learn from our senses. There is nothing in the intellect that wasn't previously in the senses. That is the main crux of it. He said that whatever is inside an individual is brought about inside because of his outside experiences. You see the difference between these two. So then there was John Locke. And John Locke gave the concept of tabula rasa. Tabula rasa means a blank slate. It is basically a theoretical foundation of learning. And the concept is, we will read the slide later on, but the concept is that mind is like a blank slate. And on that slate, every time something happens is written down. And that is how an individual learns, and that is how an individual reacts to the environment, that from his past experiences, because there is a clean slate. His concept was with Aristotle rather than with Plato. So So these are the theoretical foundations of learning. You can see the dates on top. Even on Plato and Aristotle, they have been discussing the process of learning and the knowledge itself. The epistemology is the theory of knowledge. They have been discussing the epistemology, the theory of knowledge, and the learning process for a very, very, very long time. For a very long time. And the recent research have given more theories and so many theories, but we still do not know, we still are not concrete about the learning, what is learning itself, and what is the process of learning, and how do people learn, and why do people behave differently. Now his statement is, let us then suppose the mind to be white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas, right? Then how come it to be furnished? How the ideas come into that white paper or the blank slate? Whence comes it? By the vast store which the busy and boundless fancy of man has painted on it with an almost endless variety. You know, all the experiences over the life that he has had actually paints on that slate, or actually paints or on that white paper. So that is his experiences that put words and symbols and things on that blank slate that he has. That is the mind actually. Then whence has it all the material of reason and knowledge? To this I answer in one word, from experience. Then how does it get all the materials and for the reasoning and the knowledge that he has? That is from the experience. In that all our knowledge is founded, and from the ultimate derives itself. The knowledge is founded based on the experiences, and then it derives itself. Based on those experiences we have certain knowledge, and based on that knowledge we react, we behave in a certain way. That is how I would explain that. So based on that experiences we have some knowledge, and based on that knowledge we react in certain environment, and that reaction brings about further knowledge, further experiences, and those experiences translate into knowledge again. As I said in the very start, with the example of my son touching a gas heater. He touched it, he felt it hot, and he felt that it pains actually to touch the gas heater. That was an experience that he had, and that experience translated into his mind as a knowledge. And now next time he would not walk by that heater, he would not touch that heater. Why? Because he has had experience that that heater is hot. Now that experience is imparted as a knowledge on his blank slate, and that slate is for good. It is over there, and he would always know that when a heater is on, a gas heater is on, it's hot, and never to touch it again. A very interesting analogy to all these theories. Then he said that an individual actually enter world devoid of content but with biologically performed capacities and processes. That as I said, that learning process needs body and mind. I gave you the example of God forbids a deaf person who cannot hear. If he or she cannot hear, he would not be able to learn the words from the environment. If he would not be able to learn from the words from the environment, he would not be able to express those words in the environment. So enter world devoid of content but with biologically performed capacities and processes. Whatever the systems have been built inside him by the biological system, by God in our words, by the Almighty, whatever biological capacities and processes have been built inside him, he is born with that. And they have the capacity, and they have those processes which would make him learn from the environment. Immediately experience environment through the senses. When he is born, he would experience from the environment through his senses. He would breathe, he would listen, he would smell, all those, he would touch things, he would taste things, all those things create a learning process from the environment. Then simple ideas, remembered and built upon by internal phenomena, concentration and puzzlement. Concentration and puzzlement are the internal phenomena, the capacity we were talking about, biologically built-in capacity, and then he would be able to remember simple phenomena based on whether he is puzzled or whether he concentrates on something. Simple ideas do not invented. Child must experience to develop, and all complex ideas trace back to combination of simple ideas. So complex ideas are built upon the simple ideas, and simple ideas are acquired, are not invented automatically, they are acquired from the environment. You see, it is exactly related to the example I gave you, that my son touched that heater and he had a simple idea out of that environment that the heater is hot and it pains to touch it. It gives him pain. So the point is that he have to experience, it cannot be invented automatically. He had to experience it. Either he has to learn, experience it through my knowledge that I gave him, either he learns from that, or he experiences it himself. So whatever the mode is, it was not invented automatically. A child being born automatically goes to something shining or something bright like fire or hot thing. So whenever he moves towards that thing, he would not know by default that it is not good for him unless he listens to me or he experiences, and that experience creates a simple idea that it's not good to touch it because it's hot. And that experience and various other experiences build up later on so that he can process complex ideas. He can process, because combinations of various simple ideas create a complex idea. Learner still passive. Experiences happen to learner rather than learner engaging in it, even perhaps creating it. So the point is that learner is passive. It is sort of an empty vessel waiting for knowledge to come in, and then experience happens to the learner. It is the learner who actually experiences from the environment. Experiences happen to the learner rather than he engaging with the experience himself. It is something very, you can say, complex way to express it. Experience happens to the learner rather than learner engaging in it. Learner does not engage the experience, but experience actually engages the learner. It's other way around. Causality is different. Learner is not getting in the experience, but the experience is getting to the learner, and then even perhaps creating it. The learner creates that experience, in other words. So that experience happens to the learner and that environment is created, and out of that environment that learner would learn from the environment. So moving on to the next slide. Actually, I guess we are out of time, and we would cover the remaining theories later on in the next lecture. But the question is still the same: how do people learn? And the answer is still the same: nobody really knows. And then the difficult answer is, as I said earlier, that the difficult answer is that there are so many theories, theoretical foundations. I gave you a brief history of it, and statements by Plato or Locke or by Aristotle, and that is that they have been debating the process of learning and the knowledge itself for a very long time. And then there are 6 main theories of learning: behaviorism, cognitism, social learning theory, social constructivism, multiple intelligences, and brain-based learning theory. Now, all these theories, we would cover them in the later lectures, but it would be nice if we could summarize a few very important slides in this lecture before we call it a day, and then we can, from tomorrow, from the next lecture onwards, we would be discussing these theories also. But this is just a glimpse and list of these theories that I would be discussing in the next lecture or maybe the next lectures. The main theme of it is that in order to, I would go back to the definitions of learning and start with this slide to summarize the lecture. And we found out that learning is a process in which the human individual's performance changes, or it is either a consistent or a permanent change in context of these definitions, brought about as a result of his interaction with the environment, or brought about his based on his behavior. And it is the potential to perform, as well as the change in performance, as well as his behavior and a person's behavior that can be or the capacity to behave. So all these things actually are the definition of learning processes. So the learning is itself a change in individual's behavior when he learns from the environment, when he acquires certain part of knowledge from the environment, and based on that knowledge he behaves differently the second time. So whether it is his performance in, for example, the grades and GPAs that is improving, or whether it is the performance in terms of his behavioral aspects, all that is the learning, is defined under the concept of learning. And then we discussed that learning is the process that starts from the fetus itself and ends at when the individual dies. It is not you can say confined to certain stage of life, and then it is not also confined to humans only. It is a broader thing, that is how evolution took place, that is how they tell us, and then that is how every individual and animal learns from their life through various experiences. And then we discussed that learning is a process and learning is a product as well. Process in a sense that learning involves the brain, the body, and the groups and the complete environment in which there are organizations, there is government, there is society, there are communities, there are other relationships that you have with friends and with parents and with, for example, your siblings and your wife and your children, and all those relationships accumulate into the environment, and there is a physical environment. In all of these individuals are placed in a physical environment with certain tools and things, and all those constitute the learning process. And that is how you learn from the environment that is constituted around you. And I gave you example of me giving this lecture over here, and then it is being recorded and delivered to you, and you using certain tools to get information out of it. So this is basically that learning occurs over time. Whenever, since the point you are born and to the point that an individual would take his last breath, the learning process would be continuous. And then it is also a product, because learning is a product, because out of that experience you develop a certain idea and a concept, and that idea and a concept defines your behavior and what skills that you polish. And that actually is part of the whole system in which there are attitudes and skills. And those attitudes and skills are attitudes and values actually. Attitudes and values are imparted in the society through the learning process, and then they impart further behavior. And those behaviors and values and skills and all that stuff is a product. It is outcome of the learning process. So learning is the process as well, and learning is the product as well. Because when you use that product, you create another learning experience, and the process starts over and over and over again. It is a process that goes on and on and on. And then we started to discuss the theories of learning. In the theories of learning, I highlighted that a theory is a general explanation of behavior made over time, of observations made over time, and it tries to predict the behavior of certain objects or entities, and based on that behavior theories are formulated. But the theories are not always concrete and solid and not perfect beyond any doubt. They need to be improved over time. They might need to be improved over time, and then one theory which has been accepted for a very long time might be, you can say, rejected later on, and a new theory would be built up. So the question arises that how do people learn? That is how I answered that for concrete answer we do not know for sure. Nobody knows. But then the difficult answer is that there are multiple theories, and all those theories actually focus at a certain glimpse. And all those theories are coming from different fields, like for example biology, from psychology, from philosophy, from anthropology, from evolutionary biologists, from linguistics, from neurology, and all those different areas are contributing towards how people learn. And then a very broader and very interesting definition that all these conflicting theories are not made to conflict. But since the learning process is actually, they grow out of different elements in the environment. As I said, that from neuroscientists, from psychology, from anthropology, they come out from different elements within a theoretical foundation itself. So since they come from different elements, they are made to conflict each other. They are not intentionally made to conflict, but because their foundations are different, that is why they might conflict with each other. Then we came to the brief history. We discussed the rationalist views of Plato, and that learning is within an individual, and then teacher brings out that learning process. And then we discussed Aristotle, in which that learning is an individual does not automatically has everything in himself. It is from the experiences and environment. And then we took it to John Locke, in which he explained the concept of plain slate, and that is actually to strengthen the concept of Aristotle, not Plato. Plato, that that plain slate is filled, the concept of tabula rasa, actually, the plain slate, the blank slate rather, it is filled with individuals' experiences, and that experiences translate into knowledge, and that knowledge is ultimately based on how an individual that knowledge is based on how it derives itself. The individual uses that knowledge to create further experiences, and those further experiences are again reflected on that slate. And we discussed the concept of John Locke in detail, and then in the end I mentioned that how do people learn? Nobody knows, and nobody really knows. And then there are 6 main theories of learning that I'm going to discuss in the next lectures, and we would cover them very slowly, so that you can get the ideas out of it, and I would try to put in examples wherever possible for me.